We're conducting a traffic safety check in detail. May I see your license and registration, please? What should you do if you end up in a DUI checkpoint? And did you know these roadblocks don't actually catch drunk drivers? I'm attorney Andrew Flushy, and this channel is about protecting your rights and defending your freedom. Stay tuned for my tips, but first we're going to look at how absurd these checkpoints are to begin with. DUI checkpoints are simply ineffective at actually getting drunk drivers off the road. I'll put a link in the description to an Indiana story where a journalist actually FOIA'd checkpoint results from the state, and they found an abysmal rate of checkpoints actually finding drunk drivers. Out of hundreds of cars stopped in several particular checkpoints, only 0.3% of the drivers were actually charged with DUI. So if these checkpoints are out there to catch drunk drivers and get them off the road, they're doing a terrible job of actually finding people who are driving drunk. Proponents of checkpoints, such as Mothers Against Drunk Driving, would claim that the point is not to necessarily catch drunk drivers in the checkpoints. The point is for the publicity, to let drunk drivers know that we're out there and to be a deterrent. Let's see how well that holds water. In Virginia, for example, the law does not require that the police actually advertise that we're going to be out doing checkpoints. There's no signs ahead of time. There's no ad campaign beforehand. They simply go out and start a checkpoint. So there's actually no publicity. So if the whole idea is to be public and make sure that we're being a deterrent, Virginia at least is failing in that regard too. My personal experience also says that frankly checkpoints don't actually catch many violations of any kind. There's many checkpoint plans I've personally reviewed where there were 0 people actually charged with driving under the influence. But why do we do DUI checkpoints if they don't actually find DUIs? The most important problem, in my opinion, with checkpoints is they are unconstitutional. I know the United States Supreme Court disagrees with me and says that as long as it's done in a neutral way, you can have checkpoints. But think about this. If the police had enough manpower to have a checkpoint on every road at a certain time every day, would that be constitutional? Well, under the current state of the law, if it was approved ahead of time by a supervisor, the supervisor wasn't on the scene actually running the checkpoint, if there was a neutral criteria to determine which cars you were going to stop, there was no evidence that they were targeting any individual person, those are essentially the criteria that the police have to follow for a checkpoint to be constitutional. Under the current law, then, the police, if they had enough manpower, they could simply have a checkpoint on every road all the time. You could have a roadblock. Show me your papers anytime you leave the house. That's what our current jurisprudence on checkpoints is, essentially. That would be okay. That's ridiculous. I cannot imagine our founding fathers saying that that's what they intended in the unreasonable search and seizure under the 4th Amendment of the United States Constitution. That is not what they had in mind as being a reasonable search and seizure. This brings me to the next point, that not every state actually allows DUI roadblocks. 12 states in the Union forbid the police from operating DUI checkpoints. Those 12 states, via either a law or their state constitution, have decided that it is not something they're going to permit. So what should you do if you roll up on a DUI checkpoint? How do you respond to questions and how do you protect yourself? First of all, if possible, go another way. You can make a legal turn if you see a checkpoint ahead, and you could just turn another way legally, and the police are not supposed to be able to pull you over. Now, sometimes they have somebody out in front of the checkpoint watching for that kind of thing, so they may follow you and look for some other justification to stop you. So evading the checkpoint might not be a good idea, and frankly, it's not always even possible the way they spring them on you. Let's say you weren't able to go another way, and you end up rolling into Officer Andy's DUI roadblock. License and registration, please. Where are you headed today, sir? Stop right there. You don't want to volunteer any information. You absolutely still have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you. Remain silent. That's your best opportunity to protect your rights in this scenario. I know it's very hard to remain silent sometimes. Your defense then is to specifically invoke the 5th Amendment. I invoke the 5th Amendment. The 5th Amendment is your best friend in that scenario. Would you mind stepping out to do some quick tests for me to make sure you're okay to drive? You never have to consent to roadside tests. Officer Andy wants you to do his tests to see if he's got a good enough reason to arrest you. He's already maybe suspecting that maybe you're under the influence of something, and if you get out and do his tests, you're frankly most likely going to make some mistakes and he's going to have some reason to arrest you. The tests are hard. They're not designed to be easy. They're called divided attention tests. And the whole point is to get you thinking about a couple things at once. And now you're nervous, you're worried, you don't know what he's thinking and what his intentions are. You're likely to make mistakes. Even if you have nothing to hide, you should refuse roadside tests. And the best way to refuse them Simply not answer the question. Remain silent. If they press you to do the test, just say, "No, thank you." Essentially, the only thing you have to do when you encounter a DUI checkpoint is roll down your window and provide your license and registration. That's it. Upon demand, the police can make you provide your driver's license and registration, and that's it. Keep in mind that you don't have to do any of their tests. You don't have to answer any of their questions. You don't have to even answer questions about your license or registration. You just have to provide the documents. And remember, the most important thing to defend yourself is don't talk to the police. For more on that, check out my next video on how to protect yourself with the right answers to police questions. I'll see you over there.